Welcome to the final 2020 edition of the EdjSports Head Coach Rankings. I'm Ian O'Connor, and as always, I'm joined by EdjSports co-founder Frank Frigo and Football Outsiders editor-in-chief Aaron Schatz. And today, we finally crowned this year's 2020 EdjSports Coach of the Year. We'll start by revealing the two runners-up this season. In third place is John Harbaugh, who was last year's EdjSports Coach of the Year. And in second place is Andy Reid, who now finishes second for a second year in a row. Now, let's see who the top coach is of the year, and it is Matt LaFleur. I don't mean to brag, but I did get that one right. At least half of that prediction. I said Green Bay is going to win the Super Bowl. That one we still have to wait and see. But Matt LaFleur is perhaps a surprise to some here as a top overall coach. People know Reid, Reich, and Harbaugh as being aggressive and analytical, but LaFleur has actually been really good most of the season. He jumps up to the top spot from fourth last week, and he was actually top three every week of the season before last week. So, Aaron, why don't you tell us where Matt LaFleur finished in EPI and tell us a little bit why?
Sure. He ended up third in the EPI. That's up from fifth last week. Last year, he was ninth in EPI through week 16. And the record is the same. The Packers will probably finish 13-3 this year. They were 13-3 last year. But the difference is in Aaron Rodgers' performance. Basically, when it comes to the DVOA stats from Football Outsiders, Green Bay is essentially the same on defense this year, the same on special teams, and the same running the ball. But Aaron Rodgers, instead of being like the 10th best quarterback, is the first or second best quarterback, along with Patrick Mahomes. It's been a huge upgrade, and what it means is Green Bay is not just escaping a bunch of close games anymore. Last year, Green Bay was 8-1 in one-score games. This year, Green Bay is only 4-2 in one-score games. So that's a big difference. It's Rodgers not only being more accurate, but buying into the LaFleur offense, fitting in with the LaFleur offense, and just the entire passing game has just worked phenomenally this year.
Yeah, it's one of those things we see occasionally with a quarterback, like you've mentioned. Rodgers taking that big step. There are a lot of people saying Rodgers is done. They went out, they traded up and drafted Jordan Love in the first round. A lot of people thought that could make Aaron Rodgers angry. Maybe it did, and maybe that was great because he's having one of the best years he's had in quite a while. So he ended up finishing third in CCI as well, so third in both EPI and CCI. And Frank, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so LaFleur was pretty consistent this year, and he was pretty consistent, quite frankly, last year as well. When it came to critical calls, fourth down. So he did creep up in the last week, which really in a tight race is where he emerged as our coach of the year. We did beat him up a little bit back in week 10 against Jacksonville when he had an 18% error on a fourth and short. But when you take that aside, that really turned out to be a bit of an outlier this year. He didn't really have any errors over 3%. So his consistency, his combination with what Aaron mentioned on the EPI side, really put it all together, and he had a really solid season, and in a tight race, very deserving of the Coach of the Year.
Yeah, you mentioned that 3%. Okay, he's only had two errors over that. Is that a threshold that is typically used? Is that a good in the NFL? Is 3% a pretty solid thing? Where if it's under 3%, it's really not that big of a deal. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it all matters on how much it aggregates. We've seen errors north of 20% certainly, and they definitely get into double digits. And LaFleur had one of those this year. But if you can kind of keep your error rates down, to those levels and that type of consistency, you're going to have a pretty good season.
Yep, and they haven't had as many close games as they did last year. Like Aaron mentioned, they were very good. They had a lot of close games. But especially in some of the games that they've had when they're in it close, he typically makes the right decisions. As we've mentioned before, you, Frank, specifically, that's where you get some of those big double-digit errors where coaches, make mistakes and look bad, or they make a really good call there. And his best call came in week 3, I believe it was, against New Orleans. He didn't convert that one. They won the game, and that actually gave them the leg up on the Saints for home field advantage in the NFC right now. So like I said before, LaFleur has been near the top of this list all season long. And he made the jump down the stretch and up to the top. So congratulations, Coach LaFleur, on winning the EdjSports Head Coach of the Year for 2020. You can see every coach's best and worst decision of the season at edjsports.com, and you can see their final rankings. Either you guys have anything to add on the coach rankings here? Anything heading into the playoffs that we should be looking for?
Well, let's just see LaFleur continue to make good decisions in the playoffs. That's what we want to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it really matters, especially when you get into these tighter games, which you're likely to get into in the playoffs and the pressure's on. Some of these decisions can be very highly leveraged. So if he operates the way he has during the course of the season, it should be a little bit of an advantage for him.
Well, as always, thank you guys for joining me. And like we said, check out the full rankings, the final Edge Sports Coach rankings for 2020 at edgesports.com.